Last week on the program, we heard about the Islamic State's practice of institutionalized sexual slavery of non-Muslim women. Tonight, we focus on another New York Times report about 3 seemingly normal and high-performing teenage girls who willingly left their homes in Great Britain to join the terrorist group. We begin with a video excerpt that shows the family of one of the girls grappling for answers.
I'll put the light on.
Okay.
This is Khadija's room. Very neat and tidy. She's very organised. But she wasn't sleeping here on the night that she left.
This was Khadija Sultana's home in London before she left to join ISIS. Her sister has been devastated ever since Khadija disappeared.
With the yellow jumper, that's her. So she selected all these to put in there. We went to Bangladesh. That was in 2009.
How did she get the money?
That's the question we asking the police, and you know, they haven't got it for us really.
Khadija was 16 and a straight-A student at this school. One morning, she told her mother she was leaving to study, but she never returned. The next time the family saw Khadija was on the news.
International hunt for 3 young girls believed to be on their way to join ISIS.
At Gatwick, they boarded a Turkish Airlines plane for Istanbul.
British police are out in Turkey trying to find them.
The girls weren't even old enough to drive, but they traveled thousands of miles to Syria and handed themselves over to ISIS.
And joining me now is the reporter from that report you just saw, that excerpt, New York Times video journalist Mona El Nagar. And Stephen Simon, he's a visiting lecturer at Dartmouth College. He served on the National Security Council staff during the Obama and Clinton administrations. Mona El Nagar and Stephen Simon, welcome to you both. Mona, let me start with you. Tell us about the process of reporting this story, where you had to get to know the family, get inside that community.
Sure. Well, it took a lot of time. This is a community that's, one is, on one hand, it's alarmed, by the story of these 3 girls. And on the other hand, they also feel there's a very strong sense of feeling like they're under attack, that they're, that they're being seen and viewed with suspicion. And so it was very difficult to sort of win the trust of people. And the only way to do it was to really spend time and get to know people, try to reach the families of the girls, but also really just, be in the streets, hang out with the people, get to know what's going on there, talk to young people, talk to older people, go to the mosque, the center of the community, and really just spend the time trying to understand some of the forces behind all of this.
And from that, did you understand what made these young women vulnerable to the appeal of ISIS?
Well, it's a big question to ask. The most interesting thing here, or the issue that we're trying to tackle, is not just what happened with these specific 3 girls, but basically the bigger, broader forces that are impacting many of the young people in the community, and not just these 3 girls. Part of the reason people were alarmed by the fact that they left and joined ISIS is because they see that they resemble their daughters and their siblings, and that's sort of the bigger question, is what is going on with the community in general. And this is a generation that's basically growing up in a post-9/11 world. Their sense of identity is really polarized. Girls are more visibly religious when they wear the headscarf. A lot of them face increasing Islamophobia in the West. At the same time, they're growing up and they're raised as to become devout Muslims at a time when the dominant sort of Islamic discourse is very conservative, literalist, Wahhabi discourse that, in a sense, is putting them at odds with the bigger world that they're in. So they're being pulled in different directions, and it's very hard for teenagers to sort of strike a balance between these different forces, and oftentimes that can push them to an extreme.
Stephen Simon, and we should say that all 3 of these young women we know are now married to fighters who are part of the Islamic State. Stephen Simon, how much is understood about what is going on in these Muslim communities in the West?
Well, it's difficult to get access to these communities, a point that's usually underscored in conversations with European law enforcement and intelligence officials, because these communities are, as Mona said, quite closely knit. A lot of this stuff happens in the environment of a mosque, which is difficult to penetrate if you're not part of the community. So things are a bit murky, but I think there's the general trend is fairly well understood. I don't think it's a huge mystery. And in the case of these young women, I think what we just heard was quite right, namely that what is pulling these young women to Syria is the same thing that pulls young men. There's nothing specific to the situation of these women or their desires or their habits or their patterns of thought that differs all that much in terms of their recruitability. It differs all that much from their brethren.
Mona Al-Nagar, and again, we should say out of, I guess, they estimate 4,000 Western young people have joined ISIS. Of that, maybe 500 and some are women. Is there a different argument, a different appeal made to women than to men?
Well, we're seeing an unprecedented number of women actually going. Compared to jihadis who left previously for, say, Afghanistan. I think the fact that the ISIS has gone as far as declaring sort of a caliphate and having the sort of the propaganda that it has online, its ability to sort of really cater its message specifically to women in ways that it couldn't before, this is in fact attracting and creating a bigger, wider appeal for women than it has before.
Stephen Simon, are these women, once they are there, as much of a threat as the men are, or are they playing a more supportive role?
Their role can be just as violent as the role that men play in the war. They staff checkpoints. They go on house raids. They enforce morality codes. They manage the rape brothels. They direct violence against targets, maybe in different ways than men do, but just as fervently. This is something that's been going on for a number of years, and it's not just a Muslim phenomenon. Lebanese communists, Kurds, Chechen separatists, Tamil Tigers, Hindus, they've all used women as terrorists or to participate in violent insurgencies. So nothing new on that score.
But just finally, Mona Al-Nagar, the sense is, and just quickly, that once they're there, they stay.
Once they're there, they stay. With the case of these three girls, we know that they're married, and it appears like they have no regrets, at least none that they expressed so far about going to the Islamic State, to the self-proclaimed Islamic State.
And this is despite communications from their families, I know, who've tried to reach them a number of times and tried to change their minds.
Absolutely.
Mona Al-Nagar with the New York Times, Stephen Simon at Dartmouth. We thank you both.